Hop's Zacian EX is one of the new cards we're going to be getting as part of Journey Together. And based on what I initially saw, I thought this deck was going to be absolutely incredible. It's been out now for a couple of weeks in Japan, and I thought we would take a moment to see how this deck is faring over there. I'm Jet from inthirdperson.com. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let's dive into Hop's Zacian EX and look at what this deck is doing in Japan and what to expect when this deck arrives outside of Japan. Hop's Zacian EX is a basic metal Pokemon with 230 HP, and it has 2 attacks. Close Cleave for 1 colorless energy does 30 damage, and this attack does 30 damage to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So a little bit of snipe damage there. And then its Brave Slash attack for 3 metal and a colorless does 240 damage, and during your next turn you can't use Brave Slash again. So very strong attack. You're going to be one-hit KOing almost every big basic in the game without any sort of damage modifiers, but it's very expensive at 4 total energy, and yeah, it's a lot to get to, and that definitely impacts the way people are building their decks. One of the coolest things about the Zacian deck is that it has a ton of damage modifiers. Hop's Snorlax is a support Pokemon that just sits on the bench, and Big Belly increases your Hop's Pokemon's attacks by 30. Now, this doesn't stack. You can't have 4 Snorlaxes and do an extra 140 damage or 20 damage, but you can get an extra 30, which makes all of these attacks a little more appealing. On top of that, we have the Postwick Stadium, which increases Hop's Pokemon's damage by another 30. And yet again, Hop's Choice Band increases your attack cost or your attack damage by another 30 damage, while also making your attacks cost 1 less. So if we have all of these factors in play, you've got the band on your Zacian, and you've got a Snorlax in play, and you have the Stadium in play, that Close Cleave attack is now doing 120 damage for 0 energy, and then you get a little bit of bench damage as well in the 30, and then that second attack is now doing what, 330 damage. So that's enough to one-hit KO a Charizard for 3 energy. That's pretty sick. Now here's a look at the metagame in Japan in the last week, and this tier list comes from Pokegabook, where they compile all the results from Japan City League tournaments and make this percentage split based on decks that made it into top 16 in Japan. We can see the top decks right now are Clefairy, Dragapult, and Raging Bolt, and Zacian kind of at the bottom of the, like, this isn't saying it's bad, it's just at the bottom of the meta relevant decks. And this was actually an A tier last week. It has kind of slipped a bit, but it's always been in the mix. Honestly, I thought that the Zacian deck was going to be doing better than it is right now, and there's still very much time for Zacian to climb up the charts, maybe get some more support from other Hop cards or something else. It's still in the mix here, but it's not a top tier deck at the moment. Here's just a quick glance at Zacian in the meta. I just took a screenshot from Limitless and looking at some of the most recent results. But the big thing here is that there are about 176 top 16 appearances for Zacian since January 25th. And that is, it's okay. Like, it's very much warranting of a spot somewhere in this sort of B tier. But in that same amount of time, Clefairy EX has seen, and it's not entirely fair Clefairy, because Clefairy gets teched into a bunch of other decks. Clefairy's seen like over 1,000 appearances in top 16 at the same amount of time. Dragapult and Raging Bolt are in the probably closer to 1,000 than not. So definitely Zacian a little more of a niche pick at the moment. Like, it's still strong. It's still putting up results. It's still winning tournaments, but it is a far cry from the top tier most meta relevant deck in the meta, at least at this point in Japan. When I first saw Zacian, the first thing I thought of is that this deck needs energy acceleration. And the first card that came to mind was Metang. And yes, this is a way that people are playing Zacian, but it's certainly not the most popular way. And of course, the logic here is that Metang has some energy acceleration thanks to Metal Maker. Lets you look at the top 4 cards of your deck and attach any number of basic metal energy cards that you find there and put them on to your Pokemon in any way you like, then shuffle your deck. Theoretically, yes, you could even attach them to the Snorlax if you wanted to as a single prize option, but more often than not, you're going to be powering up Zacian EX for ideally the big attack. And I do like the fact that this particular system does allow you to get those big swings in with Zacian, but Metal Maker is not guaranteed. There will be times you whiff and it sucks really bad. That being said, we do have 14 metal energy in here in order to maximize our chances of hitting with Metang. And this could be okay. It's certainly not the most popular way to play Zacian right now, but it is a way to play it, and one of the few ways that allows you to more consistently use that big swing. In this deck, we also see that assortment of supporting Pokemon and trainer cards. We have the Snorlax in there, we have the Band, we have the Stadium, so giving you a potential extra 90 damage. This player uses Prime Catcher as their A-spec of choice, where you can gust an opposing bench Pokemon into the active, and then you move one of your Pokemon into the active. And especially with being able to pivot with Mew EX, where you can move Mew EX into the active, and then switch out to whatever attacker you want, could potentially help you use Zacian's big attack 2 turns in a row. The second take on a Zacian with Metang adds in a little extra spice, and one of the big things is the Regigigas. As I mentioned in the previous section, you don't necessarily need to attach the metal energy to a metal Pokemon, which opens the door for Regigigas to be in this deck. This has the attack Jewel Breaker, where for 4 colorless energy, it does 100 damage, and if your opponent's active Pokemon is a Terra Pokemon, this attack does 230 more damage. With decks like Dragapult in the mix and Charizard, you are one-shotting both of them with this Regigigas, making it a really appealing card that can uptrade against those bigger Terra decks. This is a card I expected to see more in Hop decks. Not every Hop deck plays it, but it's a very strong card, at least on paper. Hop's Bag is a item card that allows you to search for 2 basic Hop Pokemon and put them onto your bench, then shuffle your deck. And this is kind of like Buddy Poffin, but specifically for Hop's Pokemon, where Buddy Poffin is capped out at Pokemon with 70 HP. Here you can play Pokemon that are much bigger, like your Zacian EX and your Cramorant and your Snorlax all in one go. However, some decks aren't playing any sort of energy acceleration. This one got top 16 and it doesn't have any way of accelerating any extra energy. And I think that's fine because it's more reliant on that first attack doing decent damage to the active and also chipping the bench a little bit. One of the additional attackers here is Hop's Cramorant, where Fickle Spit for 1 colorless energy does 120 damage, and if your opponent doesn't have exactly 3 or 4 prize cards remaining, this attack does nothing. So you've got a single prizer for the middle of the game, and you can boost this damage up to be upwards of, what, 210 damage? You're taking out potentially a Teal Mask Ogerpon in the active or a Pheasantipity with this for 0 energy if you've got the Band on there as well. So potentially cool single prize attacker for the mid game. Exchange Ticket is a way of getting cards out of your prizes. After counting your prize card, you shuffle them and put them on the bottom of your deck, then take that many cards from the top of your deck and put them face down as your prize cards. If something that you want is stuck in there, this deck has a lot of one-of Pokemon, for example. One-of Latias, Pheasantipity, Squawkabilly, Mew, Ursaluna, Tatsugiri, Badoo, on top of a handful of trainer cards that are also one-ofs. Exchange Ticket does give you the opportunity to grab those cards back at the risk of whatever top cards that you need are also going into your prizes. So it's a very cool card that can help you recover your prize cards, but there is an exchange there as well, and you do run the risk of prizing stuff that you would need in the immediate term. Legacy Energy is the A-spec of choice in this particular build, where the Pokemon this is attached to will drop 1 less energy when they get KO'd. So making Zacian a single prize Pokemon or making Cramorant worth 0 prizes, that can be enough to skew the math and potentially help you win the game with an extra turn or 2. This is where things get spicy. This take on a vanilla Zacian list doesn't have any metal energy in it whatsoever. We are not able to use its second attack. We are relying entirely on that first attack for our offense, which again, 30 to the active, 30 to the bench. It's not a lot, but we have a lot of ways of adding extra damage on there, including the Hops Band, including the Postwick Stadium, including Snorlax. So we're really looking to do upwards of 120 damage to the active and 30 to the bench, and piling on damage counters with that attack plus more. Instead of Metal Energy, we've got one copy of Jet Energy, which can act as a colorless energy for Zacian to continue its offense, but we also have Dark Energy here. Zacian, again, can use this for its first attack, but it's primarily here for Monkey Dory, where its Adrenabrain ability allows you to move 3 damage counters from one of your Pokemon to one of your opponent's Pokemon. And so you're looking to tank hits with Zacian and then move that damage over with Monkey Dory. There are definitely concerns with this particular playstyle that has gained popularity in Japan. I'd say based on my research, most of the Zacian lists work in this way, where they're not using that second attack and building entirely around the first attack with some snipe damage. But the problem in the long term is that we've seen this upcoming Shaman card from Heatwave Arena, where it has the ability Flower Curtain, where you prevent all damage done to your bench Pokemon without a rule box by attacks from your opponent's Pokemon. And the idea of sniping the bench and taking out smaller Pokemon will no longer be possible, or at least it's going to be harder once Shaman enters the format. Shaman is essentially a nerfed version of Manaphy, but it's going to hurt the snipe strategy of Zacian EX really bad. So while it will work very well in the Journey Together format, it may not work so well once the Shaman is in the game. Back to the deck though. Besides Zacian, we have Blood Moon Ursaluna EX as an endgame desperation attacker. Its season skill ability reduces its attack cost by 1 for each prize card your opponent has taken, so you can swing for Blood Moon and do 240 damage for as little as 0 energy if they've taken 5 prize cards. And yeah, during your next turn you can't attack again, but 240 could be enough to win the game. And yeah, even attaching 1 energy if they've taken 4 prizes is pretty reasonable as well. TM Devolution becomes a cool tech in this deck because we're very much relying on doing chip damage here and there, and you can get enough damage onto your opponent's Pokemon so that when you devolve them, there's too much damage on that smaller Pokemon, at which point they just get knocked out. Another cool tech here is Calamitous Snowy Mountain. When any player attaches an energy card from their hand to one of their basic non-water Pokemon, put 2 damage counters on that Pokemon. And yes, that's going to hurt your Zacian as well, but you'll also be doing damage to your opponent's Pokemon when they attach energy. And on top of that, you can move that damage that you caused to yourself with Calamitous Snowy Mountain with the Monkey Dory, so it's not as big of a deal. Of course, if you're playing against a water deck, then this tech is basically useless, but more often than not, it's going to help you more than hurt. If we want to play a more traditional style of Zacian list that does have access to that second attack, we could play it with Archaludon, which is another popular way of playing with Zacian. Archaludon EX is one of the biggest meta threats right now and a big meta threat going forward. It is a bulky Stage 1 EX with 300 HP. It can power itself up with that Assemble Alloy ability, and then Metal Defender does a solid 220 damage for 3 metal energy that you can oftentimes charge up to yourself. But we can also use this as a support piece, powering up that energy towards Zacian EX, at which point you can be swinging for 220 damage or more. Surfer is an interesting tech here. It gives you a pivot option while also letting you draw until you have 5 cards in hand. So whether you need to switch out into the Zacian or switch into the Archaludon, giving you a little bit of movement options while also filling your hand with cards. Crispin is a nice addition here. Lets you grab 2 energies of different types, put 1 into your hand and then attach another one to a Pokemon. I really like the combo of grabbing a metal and a dark, where you can attach the energy to your Monkey Dory, and then with the one in hand, you can power up either your Zacian or Archaludon. Minor changes between the first Archaludon list and this one. This one has a copy of Professor Turo's Scenario in it, where you get to put one of your Pokemon in play into your hand. In particular, using this on Archaludon is really nice. After it takes a hit, you can scoop up that Archaludon and then evolve a Duraludon into Archaludon, at which point now you have a fresh Archaludon while also accelerating energy to the board. Blood Moon Ursaluna also makes its way into this list as an endgame desperation attacker. This take on a Zacian deck has Dusknoir in it. Again, this is one that has no metal energy in it. This time it only has 4 jet energies for pivoting and for using Zacian's first attack. On top of the damage that Zacian is doing, Dusknoir can drop 13 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. If you use this ability, this Pokemon is knocked out. So on top of your initial chip damage, you're also getting in that big Dusknoir blast. And if you play the math right, you can take out smaller Pokemon or incrementally chip away at big Pokemon till you're able to win the game. Should also note here that Dusclops can drop 5 damage counters when it's KO'd. More often than not, you're going to want to use the Dusknoir, but Dusclops can fix the math just enough as well in certain situations. Here's another take on the Dusknoir variant. On top of Zacian doing decent chip damage and Dusknoir, we also have a couple of copies of Iron Valiant EX. We're not using this as an attacker, but its Tachyon Bit's ability allows you to drop 2 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon when you move Iron Valiant to the active. And to support Iron Valiant, we have a ton of switch cards in here. We have Future Booster Energy Capsule, which when attached to Iron Valiant gives it free retreat. We also have 4 copies of Switch, and we have 4 copies of Jet Energy, all of which allow Iron Valiants to dance in and out of the active, and then you can swing for your Zacian attack, which does damage to the active and the bench, and you've got Dusknoir to blow up to drop damage counters wherever you want. We also see 2 copies of Mist Energy here, where you get to prevent all effects of attacks used by your opponent's Pokemon done to the Pokemon this card is attached to. In particular, against a deck like Dragapult, the Phantom Dive damage counters get blocked if they try and drop them on a Pokemon with Mist Energy. Again, leaning into this smaller attacks and chip damage and moving damage counters around, we have a Froslass variant. And this time we are using Froslass to drop a damage counter on each Pokemon that has an ability. And most meta decks have a bunch of Pokemon that have abilities. So on top of the chip damage that Zacian's doing, we're adding even more damage with the Froslass. Cleffa's a neat little include here, where for 0 energy, Grasping Draw allows you to draw until you have 7 cards in hand. Technical Machine Evolution's a really nice attack, turn 1 going second, where for 1 colorless energy, you get to evolve 2 of your bench Pokemon. That can get you your Frostlasses on the board early. TM Devo's another nice tech include here, where for 1 colorless energy, you get to devolve each of your opponent's evolved Pokemon to their next highest evolution. So get a bunch of damage on the board with the Monkey Dory and the Froslass and the Zacian. And again, I don't have a slide for it here, but there's 3 Monkey Dories in this deck, allowing you to move upwards of 90 damage from your Pokemon to your opponent's Pokemon. So as you're seeing here, lots of chip damage that you're doing between Zacian, Froslass, and Monkey Dory, and Devolution can help you take out those big stage 2s, especially if they use Rare Candy on a prior turn, wiping out potentially multiple prizes in one go. One last list we're going to look at here, and this one leans very heavily into the Iron Valiant strategy. Again, Iron Valiant drops 2 damage counters anywhere on the board when you move it into the active, and we've got 3 copies of Iron Valiant here that we can dance in and out of the active to snipe. On top of that, we have tons of Switch cards. We have 4 copies of Switch, we have 4 copies of Jet Energy, and we have 4 copies of Surfer, which gives us a total of 12 switching options. Technically, there's actually even more than that because we have Penny as well, which lets you put one of your basic Pokemon and all attached cards into your hand. It's, for example, if you put Snorlax in the active and then you scoop it up with Penny and you move Iron Valiant in, that's another opportunity for Iron Valiant to drop damage counters on the board. On top of that, of course, Scoop Up Cyclone lets you put one of your Pokemon and all attached cards into your hand, so you can use this to heal off a Zacian if it's taken a hit, on top of being able to move Iron Valiants in and out. There we go. That's a look at Zacian EX. And things have gone not in the way that I would have thought. I thought Zacian would have been doing better in Japan. I also didn't think that it would rely on Close Cleave so heavily as its primary attack. Again, I would say that the variations that are most popular in Japan are those that have Archaludon and those that are relying entirely on that first attack and just dropping damage counters everywhere. Which version are you more excited to play? The one that relies entirely on that first attack, or do you want access to that big swing? Let me know in the comments below. But for now, I gotta get going. Thank you so much for watching. You can find me on all the things: YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram at @InThirdPerson. You can find me on Twitch at @InThirdPerson, where I stream the Pokemon trading card game every Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, like I am right now. And check out the website, inthirdperson.com, for more articles and videos on video games, board games, and other nerdy pursuits. If you're watching this on Twitch, stick around. I'll be right back. Before our friends on YouTube, we're out of here. Later.